Good morning, everybody. My name is Darren Fong. I'm the student lead for Entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is Sonoma State University's entrepreneurship program, and it's led by a group of students here. And our mission is to support, inspire, and engage entrepreneurs at Sonoma State University by doing three things. One, that's by growing the community and network of entrepreneurs. Two, by growing student businesses. And three, by offering workshops and opportunities for experiential learning. So to us, an entrepreneur is somebody that can jump off a cliff and figure out their wings on the way down. If you have an idea, if you have an idea that can solve a problem or need, you have the potential to start a business and be your own entrepreneur. But here's the truth: having an idea is easy, but actually doing it is really hard. I've started 2 businesses during my time here at Sonoma State University, and trust me, they were no walk in the park. But I was passionate about the problem I wanted to solve, and I made many sacrifices along the way to make my dream come a reality. Although I didn't make the millions that I hoped for, I did learn a lot about the business world, something that I could have never learned in a classroom. I also learned a lot about myself and developed valuable skills that I will be able to take into my future careers. If you do choose to start a business today, I guarantee that it will challenge you in the greatest way possible and will bring the best out of you. I am excited today and proud to announce the first Sonoma State University Entrepreneurship Conference. Today we'll be focusing on the theme, Be Your Own Boss. There are many perks to being your own boss, such as working on your own time, having more responsibility and control over your business, and having more freedom. There isn't someone constantly breathing down your neck and telling you what to do, as opposed you're doing the telling. On the flip side, being your own boss involves many challenges and difficulties, like high amounts of stress, working crazy long hours, always dealing with problems, and there's an ongoing pressure to perform. Today, four individuals from different business backgrounds will share their stories, and we hope that this will give you a better insight as to what it means to be an entrepreneur, and to hopefully inspire a few of you to start your own businesses in the near future. I want to introduce our first speaker, James Eisenberg. He started his career at Netscape and soon after earned his MBA at Yale University. He went on to build Ernst & Young's consulting division for startups in the Silicon Valley and worked with dozens of venture-backed startups to help them get their first customers. Since then, he has founded a number of tech startups, with his most recent being White Hot Cloud, which is a cloud provider of software solutions focused on climate change initiatives. James is an active mentor to students and graduates at Sonoma State University, helping them to sharpen their marketing offerings, form their initial teams, and raise startup capital. He's been a team mentor for the Lean Launchpad class taught here at Sonoma State University by Armand Galinsky and Cheryl Laughlin. I'd like to welcome to the stage James Eisenberg.
Thanks, Darren. Good to be here with you all today. I want to thank the Entrepreneur Group for inviting me. This is it's a great opportunity whenever you get a chance to can I pull this out? Is that all right? Be with like-minded individuals. Entrepreneurs are a bit of a different breed than the average bear. So there's thousands of people in the Sonoma State community, but look at how few people are in this room. And that really speaks to your interest and dedication in being an entrepreneur, and I congratulate you. So Darren asked me to speak today on the topic of be your own boss, and since I'm the first speaker, we thought it might be a good idea to talk a little bit about why would you want to be an entrepreneur to begin with. And I've spent half of my career as an employee and half of my career founding companies. And if I look at it, my satisfaction really is much greater as an entrepreneur. And I was kind of curious. I jumped on Google this morning, and I asked the question, what % of people are happy in jobs and what % are happy as entrepreneurs? And I found 2 really interesting studies. One was covered by Fortune about a year ago that said 25% of people in the United States are satisfied in their jobs. That's 75% of the people who don't like going to work every day in this country. And globally, it's 13% like what they do. which is pretty shocking. And from an entrepreneur standpoint, I found a study done at Babson, which focuses on entrepreneurship, and they said 90% of entrepreneurs are satisfied not just with their career choices, but with their life in general. And of course, they're biased because they're a school in entrepreneurship. But even if you take those two numbers and say that they have bias in them, they're directionally, I think, pretty accurate. And what it says is there's something about entrepreneurship and starting your own business that's different than working for another company. Whether that be control over what you do, or being able to have a vision and fulfill that, having the freedom of working how you want to work, and also being able to reap the rewards of your own effort. Companies can hire you and pay you a wage because on average you're developing more value for them than they have to pay you. That's kind of how they make money. If you want to capture that excess value, you have to go do the hard thing and do it yourself. And like Darren just told you, there's really no easy path to start your own company, particularly your first, one or two ventures. There's going to be a learning curve. And if you go in with that knowledge, I think it's not surprising when you hit challenges. So, if we step back from entrepreneurship and just say, entrepreneurship is your career choice and that fits into your life, and you look at life and you could say, well, life is kind of a game. And as a game, what do you think would be helpful to know as you play a game? Anyone? Rules are interesting, usually made by other people to restrict us. And some of the greatest entrepreneurs are ones that break those rules. But it's helpful to know the rules, but not necessarily abide by them. What else might it be interesting to know? Yeah, just shout out. How to play the game. Yeah. How to win. What is the objective? Yeah, and you might not always win, but that's your goal, right? Your goal is to win and hopefully enjoy it along the way. And so what is the objective of this life with this game we call life? What is it at the end of your life when you look back? How will you know that you won? You're happy. You're happy. And if 75% of your life is spent in a career or job that you don't like, you're going to have a hard time winning that game. So an entrepreneurship is a choice that statistically heading out the door that you have a better probability of winning that game. And even if you didn't know whether you wanted to be an entrepreneur and start your own company or go into a job and you're on the fence, statistically if you picked entrepreneurship and went down that path, you've got a better chance of winning that game. So I worked in Silicon Valley for about 20 years, and venture capital is the way that fuels companies and startups. And these are really smart people. They've got MBAs from Stanford and Harvard. They're executives with decades of business experience. They have access to all information, inside information, knowledge from all over the world. And they have a slew of companies knocking on their doors, giving them business plans. And they pick the best after much scrutiny, months and months of due diligence. And at the end of the game, 80 to 90% of the companies they choose fail. That's a staggering statistic when you think about the amount of resource that goes into picking those companies. So why is that? And what I've seen in my career is there's two predominant reasons why these companies don't succeed. One is they didn't have commercial value. They picked an idea that wasn't either ready for the time or wasn't correctly conceived. And the other is a team problem. It usually has to do with how you put your teams together and your advisor groups together. And that determines really how well you execute. And there's a saying in Silicon Valley that the investors would rather choose a good team with a bad idea than a bad team with a good idea. Because the good team will figure out they have a bad idea and they'll fix it. And the bad team will take the good idea and ruin it. So it's an interesting thing. So you look at the commercial value. Now, there's a class here on campus that you have access to, which if is still offered and you can take it, I highly recommend it, and that's the Lean Launchpad class. It's Steve Blank's work that he put together. He made a lot of companies. One was Epiphany. It was a huge success. And he put together something called a business canvas. That is something that's accessible to you whether you're in the class or not. It's on the web and it's free. And it will help you think through your idea and go out and do some surveys and find if it has commercial value. I use it myself in my own businesses, and it's very well thought out, and it's a simple tool. If you have something that has commercial value and you head out to create your company, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to put together your team. And this is where it gets interesting, because typically we like to work with our friends. We pick people that we know and we like, and this ends up being sometimes not the best decision. I've worked in startups that were created by CEO founders that brought in their soccer buddies, and we had a lot of fun, but we wasted $20 million. And this happens all the time in the Valley. People bring their friends in. And you'll be really tempted to do that because the human psyche likes to be surrounded by people that tell you yes, and that feels good. And this is the psychology of entrepreneurship. When you do the things that are hard, then your life is easy. If you do the things that are easy, your life is hard. And if you pick people because it's easy to have them around you, you will have a hard life. Instead, you have to have introspection and know where are you strong, which we tend to know, and where are you weak, which we tend not necessarily to either know or want to know. And as we do the hard work of looking within and being really brutally honest with ourselves and knowing where we are in lack, you can correct that by bringing on team members that balance those skills out, and not just hard skills, but soft skills. So when you do this, you go through a tremendous amount of self-development as an entrepreneur. And I think when I look back at my startups and also the jobs I've had, I grew so much more and so much faster as an entrepreneur than as an employee. I would say 1 year as an entrepreneur is equivalent to in a minimum of 5 years as an employee, maybe 10. Just because you're not usually taxed as an employee like you are as an entrepreneur. If you don't build your teams and go out and win business and build your partnerships and constantly work to succeed and compete, which by definition keeps you sharp, like an athlete, right? You fail. And it's painful, and it's something that you don't necessarily experience as an employee of a company. So that's sort of the broad scope of what I've seen in terms of success and failure. Now it's interesting because I want to go back to something I said earlier on choosing a company that's commercial value, and this is where, as I've matured as an entrepreneur and a CEO, I've become much more interested in. And that's looking at ideas that aren't just of commercial value, but of societal value. Now, I'm not talking about nonprofits, or NGOs, which serve a very important purpose in the economy as well. I'm talking about ventures that are known as social ventures, B Corps, you may have heard them called, mission-driven organizations. These are companies that not only are solving a commercial problem, but they're solving a societal problem. You think about someone like Tesla. So they're innovating hundreds of patents around battery technology and new ways for propulsion, and they're putting their IP into the public, which is pretty incredible, to think about what that means, to be able to share knowledge like that. We see sharing economy businesses like Airbnb and Uber that are transforming the way we look at owning versus renting or sharing. And these have deep implications for our world. Today we have no shortage of large-scale challenges like climate change, like energy usage, clean water, food supplies, challenges with medicine. And every one of these have such great impact for society that you get a feel-good factor when you work on these mission-driven companies. And something else interesting happens. If you go back to the team discussion that we just had, that when you put together a mission-driven company, it tends to attract other people who are passionate about your idea. And when you run into those inevitable conflicts, you have a basis of communication to be able to join on for that particular mission. And this becomes a really big deal. So following the trends when you're thinking about creating your company is very important. And I don't mean the trends that you'll hear on the news. I mean the trends that are the real underlying aspects of what's happening in the world today. And you can kind of feel them. And pick something that has meaning to you, because there's no shortage of things you can pick. You might as well pick something that you love as well, because this is what you're going to spend 4, 5, 6 years of your life on. And then find people around you that are as passionate as you are and fill in the blanks of the skills that you don't have, and you're going to have a really good chance of success. One of the books I'll recommend to you is a book by Napoleon Hill, and he wrote this in 1925, and it was at the behest of Andrew Carnegie, who at the turn of the last century was the richest man in the world. And he put Napoleon Hill in touch with his buddies like Henry Ford and Edison and the leaders of global business, not just here but abroad. And for 20 years, Napoleon Hill went and studied the success model of these people, and he wrote a book called The Law of Success, which you can get on Amazon. And there are many versions. See if you can get the 1925 version, because they've been edited several times. And in this book, it will tell you how to run a successful business and a successful life. And most of what you'll find in the bookstores today is taken from that book, usually taken from someone else who took it from that book. So that's sort of the original source. A more esoteric book I'm going to recommend to you is one of the trends that's happening right now is a convergence of science and spirituality. And you think, well, I'm in an entrepreneurship conference. Why would that matter to me? Because it's a very interesting thing that in your lifetimes there is going to be amazing discoveries about the quantum field. And the quantum field is going to be where we draw our energy from, and it's going to be a way of transport, and it's going to be a way of energy medicine, and it's going to be a way that you learn to interact in the world for greater success and happiness. And there's a book called The Field by Lynn McTaggart, which is an introduction to this concept. And why does this matter for you? Because entrepreneurs, we're practical. We don't have a lot of time to do things that don't directly impact our work. And this is very important because this book, The Field, and this concept of the 0-point field and how you interact with it, in the Western world, it's called the observer effect. And that's the observer of an experiment actually changes the outcome of it by his or her thoughts. In the East, it's called, oneness. We're all connected. You use this field when you go out into the world, whether you know it or not. It's a little bit like gravity. It just exists. But when you become aware of it and learn how to interact with it, this field actually will help you be successful. And there's something that happens when you pick an idea that has societal value, that you get like a tailwind from this field, and it creates luck, which is a meeting of intention, purpose, and opportunity, for my definition. And things just happen. Right place, right time, right people, and it moves you along like a wave. You still have to do things correctly, but you have that just a little bit extra that oftentimes in business is all that's needed to make you successful. So my career has come to working on businesses that have purpose, working with all of you to be mentors, to help you form your ideas and your companies, because that gives me meaning and my effort meaning. And for me, winning in life also means to contribute, that I've done something of value, that I've changed lives for the better, that I've been happy, that I've been successful in raising my family, that I have succeeded and been rewarded by society in many different ways based on my contribution. And there's one last book I'll recommend to you called The Science of Being Rich by Wallace Wattles. Pretty uncommon book. And in this book, he explains the science behind service and how it's inextricably linked to wealth. And I know when I graduated school, all I wanted to do was make money. And there was this billionaire came to speak to us, and he said to our group, whatever you do when you graduate, don't leave here just to make money. And we kind of laughed because it was easy for him to say because he was a billionaire. But it turns out that what he was saying was very, very important and something I couldn't understand then. But when you pursue money at the expense of everything else, you will get money. But your health will suffer, your relationships will suffer, and you will not be happy, because at the end of the day, we buy things for the feeling that we think it's going to give us. And if you think about that, you'll see that that's true. Everything, like Clayton said, reduces to being happy at the end of your life. And it's not to say that money causes unhappiness, because that's not a true statement either. It just is a thing. However you choose to use that energy, it will have that outcome. There's There's a video on YouTube. It's called The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. And it's I don't know, maybe a 20-minute clip, and it's an old technology. It's like a skipped record or something. But what he says there is an integration of what I'm talking about here today in terms of energy, luck, success, and wealth. It's definitely worth 20 minutes or so of your time. I highly recommend that. And so with that, I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna take questions if anyone has questions, and I'm happy to answer anything I can do. Thank you. By the way, I'm happy to see some women in the room, because one of the biggest trends that's happening now is the rise of women, and it's not a quota-driven diversity plan, rise of women. It's a real recognition by society that women and feminine energy in general has a different thought process than male energy in general. Women energy, female energy tends to be very constructive and creative and cooperative. Male energy tends to be dominant and destructive and winner take all. And I'm generalizing here, but the guys in the room, if you can raise your feminine quotient a little bit, it's going to help you a lot in the business that's coming forward. And for the women, you have a clear runway to start businesses and get capital. There's all sorts of organizations forming right now to support women entrepreneurs. And I would highly encourage you to stay that path, because women are so underrepresented right now in the world. Like in the United States even, they're 50% of the workforce and 8% of corporate boards. So extremely underrepresented, and the mindset that they bring to a predominantly male-dominated society is going to help us gain some balance in our marketplaces and also in our governments. Yes?
So what you were talking about in terms of working with your friends, I definitely agree that, going around to getting away in business and certain things like that. But I think there is, could be something to be said about, knowing the skill set of specific friends and working with them in the past, knowing what they can help the business on and what, their downsides are. So can you maybe touch on that a little bit and, maybe talk about some of those pros as well and maybe how those might not be beneficial?
Right. So it's a great question, and ultimately, no one knows you like your friends, and you trust your friends, and that's a big deal. Trust is very, very, very hard to come by when you have people that you have known for years, and you kind of have each other's back, so to speak. That's a really big deal. You have to ask yourself this question, though. If it comes to the point where your friend is in a position that's hurting your company, and you have to decide, are you going to keep your friendship or are you going to keep your company? And that's what makes this so difficult, because we're so compelled to pick our friend. And now it gets really complicated if you raise capital, because your board members don't share your love of your friend. And they will tell you in black and white. I was in a company, and we had a very interesting board. It was 2 or 3 billionaires and one almost billionaire. And no one needed the money. This was all about the game of winning. And one of the billionaires said to the other almost billionaire, I don't want any more of my money going to pay for your friends' soccer games, something to that effect. And it was a very tense moment in the boardroom. That company was torn apart because the CEO had a very difficult choice to make, and ultimately he lost the company and his friends. So really think about it, and if you go into it, almost have like some sort of a prenuptial agreement. You're going to also have a situation where someone's hiring someone. So someone is going to invariably be in charge of the other person at some level, and friendships don't tend to work like that. Friendships tend to be peer-based. So now you're their boss. It's a very different dynamic, which may not be appreciated by the underling of the dyad. So you have that conversation and say, look, I'm hiring you now as my CFO. Obviously, you've never taken a company public. If we get successful and grow, I may have to replace you in that role. Hopefully, we can still keep you in an accounting or something finance base, but it may not work out that way. I may have to let you go. How would you feel about that? Have that conversation up front so there's not that shock when it comes out. At Ernst & Young, I got to see the insides of probably 20 startups, venture funded, some really successful, some huge craters, and always there was a problem with founder friends. It hardly ever works out, and for that reason, the VCs really dislike it. They have an understanding, I think, amongst themselves that it's great until it's not great, and then when it's not great, they take control of it. But it can work sometimes. Very rarely. Other questions? Yes. Yeah, so I started this business a couple of years ago, and it takes advantage of, so one of the hugest trends happening in technology today is everything's moving to the cloud. And the technology moves so quickly that companies don't have the ability really to track that fast. So there was a great opportunity to help companies, large-scale organizations, move their data centers, which was old technology, into Amazon pretty much, and Google. And Microsoft. They sort of own the whole marketplace for enterprise cloud. And we were doing that for a little while, and then I got my desire to want to do something not just of commercial value, but also of societal value, and saw this opportunity with climate change because there's this huge conference coming up in Paris where the United States is likely to make some commitments that are tough. And the corporations have to implement them. And sometimes these things are really not realistic given time frames that they sign on to. And most companies don't really have an understanding of climate change largely is about carbon. And most companies' carbon emissions are taking place upstream or downstream in supply chains somewhere in Asia. In California, we have food systems, so there's a lot of carbon that goes into the atmosphere from there. But it ends up being a huge data problem because to be able to understand where all that information is number one, and then to be able to sort it quickly and know what items in your supply chain are toxic according to the EU, or what items are toxic, according to the EPA, and do all the compliance and reporting that goes around. So it's a huge problem, which we have a good solution for. And I feel good about it because we're helping companies come to terms with how they interact as a global citizen. And that's kind of what the basis of the company. So I didn't actually start out that company with a mind toward a societal good. That evolved in the story because that's sort of what drives me. And when I saw the opportunity, I just jumped on it. Any last questions? Great. Well, this has been fun. I love doing this. I think that you as entrepreneurs and future entrepreneurs, you're our future. And I'm proud of you guys. And I know you can do it. Stick to it. It's a tough mountain to climb, but when you get up to the top of it, life is really good. And you will inspire others around you. So go for it. Thank you.
Thank you, James, for the presentation. It was great. Hello, I'm Michael Anton. I'm part of the entrepreneurship program at Sonoma State University, as well as with Darren, Pasha, Armin, and a few others in the crowd. The next speaker I'm going to introduce is actually a Sonoma State alumni. He is the owner and founder of Blacklist Watches. This man is inspired by the automotive industry to create and design watches that are unique to his customers. Please welcome to the stage, Justin Itorovich.
Good. All right. My name's Justin. I've been a student here for the last 2 years, graduated last year in May. Basically started my entire company while in school. Today I wanted to go over a little bit of how I started and also the real life obstacles that happen in starting a small business, and one specific event that was pretty detrimental. So I started out 3-4 years ago just designing watches. I have a love for watches and just thought I couldn't find something that I wanted, and I started designing them myself. Fast forward a couple years, and now I own a small company. I produced 500 watches, working on a second line right now, and it's been a really big learning experience. And the event that I want to talk about is difficult for me to talk about because it was only about a year ago, and it was at the tipping point of failure. And it's when I lost a lot of money. A lot of money. And I haven't talked about it because I didn't want to sound weak or like I was a bad business person or whatever. I haven't ever talked about it publicly. Only a very few people know. And it was when I had ordered a run of watches, right? I ordered 500 watches. You put a 30% deposit down on something like that, and then in 5 months, you have to pay up. They get delivered, everything's happy, right? Well, when you pay for something overseas like that, these were made in Switzerland, you have to wire money. And the first money wire went no problem. It was a different account. And then when it came time to do the second and third money wire for the remaining balance, well, you've heard of phishing, right? On the internet, email phishing, stuff like that. Well, that happened to me. So what happened was they sent an email. I'm used to getting emails from my supplier. They send me emails, they send me the invoices with the bank account information, all that good stuff, right? And then I take that to the bank, I make the money transfer, no problem. Well, I had just the right amount of money in my account to make that order. I had pre-sold a lot of watches. I had customers waiting. They've been waiting for 5 months. It was time. And someone had been monitoring my emails and figured out a way to send me an email where it looked like it came from my company with the exact invoice, bank account changed. Okay? Yeah, this is real life business. This is what a small business goes through. And that's why I wanted to talk about it, because this is real. This is as real as it gets. When you're playing with someone else's money, it's a little bit different. When you have a big corporation, it's a little bit different. But when it's just you and it falls down to you, I have 200 people waiting for something and I can't buy it because I lost their money. That's a problem. This is real. This is real life business. So what ended up happening, I sent money to a different account, not my manufacturer's account, and it was lost. I lost $23,000. Now, to some of the older business people, that doesn't sound like a lot, but when that is the entire bank account that you have, that's everything you have. So if you scale it up to a big business, that's like losing everything. You lose everything. So I lost that money, gone forever. It was about a year ago. I found out on Thanksgiving. Kind of sucked. Needless to say, I was not thinking about turkey. So the one instant that it became real, right? So that happens, you kind of realize that you're like, oh my God, these emails stack. Gmail, it stacks your emails in the same thread. Well, it came from that person. I'm looking, I'm like, whoa, what in the world? I realized that the bank accounts are different. Okay, that's real. But the moment that I really realized that it's time, like there's no turning back. These people paid for something. They trusted me with their money. I have to deliver this. That time came when I was at the gym. And I was working out, and I was on the machine where you're doing back workout. You're facing the machine, you're looking at the padding, and you're doing this. And I just looked at that thing And I looked at that teal colored pad, and tears just came down my face. I was just crying. I was like, holy crap, I just lost $23,000. That's 4 years here at Sonoma State. Just about. That's a lot of money. If you're making $10 an hour, you'd have to work an entire year with no expenses to make that. That's a lot of money, especially for a student. I was a student here at the time. It's crazy. And I said, okay, I have to figure out a way to make this work. I got people waiting. There's no turning back. And being an entrepreneur, that's what it's all about. There's no turning back. Once you start something, you have to finish it. Until you have exhausted everything that you can possibly exhaust, and you either accept failure, you have to keep going forward. And I was not ready to accept failure. I was not going to let down all these customers that trusted me. So, and I'm a fan of real life examples, which is why I'm telling you guys this. So I'll tell you how it worked out and how I still have a company. Well, I was contacted by a big company in San Francisco. It's called Touch of Modern. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may have not. And they wanted my watches. Well, I didn't have them. Couldn't pay for them. So I went down to San Francisco with the samples that I had. We met with one of their buyers, which they rarely do. And we went over and came out with a deal that they would help me get them if I sold them to them for X amount of dollars. And so I went through with that deal, and I had enough money to pay for a part of the shipment. So I got the shipment here, sold them their portion, and I was still needed the 23 grand. And another problem that happened was my manufacturer said, hey, you don't have the money? Well, if you don't have the money in 60 days, we're selling your goods to someone who does have the money. So you have no company. If someone else has your product, you're kind of screwed. And so I had basically 60 days to make $23,000. How did I do it? Worked with that company, Touch of Modern. They sold a good amount of watches. They sold like 50 in a week, which was pretty big. It was about a $12,000, $13,000 payday for me. Well, that's not the rest. So after the other watches were here, I sold them. The first month I made about $17,000. The month following, I made the remainder and was able to get them here. So, and why is that story important? Because you find a way. As an entrepreneur, you find a way. You don't take failure. It would have been very easy for me to say, well, shoot, I lost all this money. I'm sorry, guys. There's no watches. We're done here. A lot of companies do that. They take other people's money, they fail, and that's the end of it. There's no resolution. And I think that's what's most important is when you're starting a company, when you have your back up against the wall and there's no other way but moving forward, that's how you have to do it. You can't just accept failure. Things get hard. Things are tough. You lose money. You make money. But you got to keep moving forward. And I think that's one of the most important things to me. And the main thing I wanted to touch upon being a young entrepreneur, because I did this just like you could do this. And you can go through the same hardships, but you just got to keep moving forward. And I think that's the most important thing for me. And another thing that I wanted to touch upon was opportunity costs, right? So everyone in here, a lot of you guys are students, and I think Darren wanted me to talk about how I started while I was in school. And I think the main thing that I think about when I did that was opportunity costs, right? I was up a lot of nights, I was not partying. I haven't even been to a Sonoma State party. I'm sure they're awesome. You guys are cool, but I was focused on business. That's what I was doing every night. China, Switzerland, well, their day starts at 6 and 9 o'clock. So there was no party. I was working. And when, I was asked to go out and do these things, and that was always something that was in the back of my head, like, what could I be doing? Like, is this that important? And that's why I'm here. That's why I have a company, and although it is small, that's, why I graduated with, a small business, is because I took the time to make it happen. And it takes a lot of time, granted. I mean, I worked for 2 years every day, a lot of hours before any payday. And a lot of, startups are like that. There's no payday in the beginning. And I think that's really important for people to understand is it's not easy. It's not going to be fun a lot of the times, but it is rewarding. And you learn a lot along the way. And that's why we do it. And I think I wanted to take a lot of questions if there was any. But yeah. Yes. Yes, it was. Yeah, it's very rough. Yes. Great question. So I started with around $3,500 in my account. I worked, I was a pool boy the summers. I saved a little bit. I saved everything I could. And spent everything that I had on this. So there's a lot of risk because I spent everything I had. And when you drain your bank account multiple times, just one after another, you have nothing. It's hard.
Can you talk a little bit about the Kickstarter campaign? What your mission was, and how you went about approaching that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way I raised the initial capital to fund all this was through Kickstarter. For those of you who don't know, it's a crowdfunding website, and basically people pre-order a good, and when it's done, you ship it out. And this allows companies like me to reach minimum quantity orders, because for watches and a lot of other products, it's pretty high. You can't just order 20 of something and, hey, cool, we have a business. No. You have to, like, for me, it was like I had to order 500, and I was their smallest client. So 500, that's a lot. It roughly equated to about a $70,000 order. And there's no way, 22-year-old, 21-year-old college student was going to have $70,000. It's just a lot of money. So what I did with the Kickstarter was made the video, lifestyle, wearing the samples, doing that thing, took a lot of pictures, and did a big write-up basically on the watches, the company, where I wanted to be, the risks involved, just everything that surrounded the brand. And after that, I just launched it on the Kickstarter, and people started pouring in. Simultaneously, I had started a Facebook page, which I was advertising with, so I got a lot of customers from that. And then a lot came from just, random Kickstarter people. So, did that? Okay, great. Yeah.
Did you work at the School of Business and Economics while you were here?
Not really. Just being honest. I spoke with Rich Campbell a lot. He's a great professor here. I like him a lot on a personal level too. And I spoke with him kind of after everything. The Kickstarter was during like my first semester here, so I had pretty much gone through everything beforehand, before coming to Sonoma State. But it definitely helped me out a lot in the business sense to be in these classes and being able to relate what I was doing to the concepts that they were teaching. Like, when you're actually doing it, it's easy to think about when the professor's giving you the concept. So, I don't know if that answered. Okay, great. About. Right. Well, right now I think as an entrepreneur you never stop thinking. You never stop. And right now I'm at the point where the watch thing is great, but I'm still thinking forward. I'm thinking to the next thing, right? The watch thing probably not going to make me a millionaire, but it gives me a little play money to move on, and that's what it's all about. It's just a stepping stone, and I feel pretty good about the watch thing. You know, not a lot of people can say that, you know, you had a successful run of something, you made something. Like, it's really cool to say, you know, I have watches all around the world that people are wearing, that people like, that people, you know, they're on their wrist. And I get, you know, from jet pilots to actors, you know, stuff like that. It's just cool feeling. Most of my customers are actually in the United Kingdom. I've shipped all around the world. So I think that's really rewarding. And one of the best parts and perks of doing this is I get to interact with those people. They like talking to me. They like finding out more. And that's what's really rewarding. And I've made a lot of great friends along the way. People that are really interested in watches and interested in a young person doing something and trying to, you know, do something with their life more than just work for someone else and create someone else's dream. So, yeah.
You find that the way you found funding through Kickstarter, do you have a more loyal customer base? Do you see a lot of recurring orders?
Yes and no. So I think that there's a lot of Kickstarter has evolved since I even have done my funding, right? So I did this over a year ago, and Kickstarter, like about a year and a half. Well, there is roughly 3 times as many projects on Kickstarter now. Part of that is established companies realizing that Kickstarter is a great place to sell more stuff. And so, yes and no, right? So a lot of the people that funded my project are not even on Kickstarter much anymore. They, you know, got their thing, they left. So I did not find a ton of backers coming back a year and a half later. It was more so the customers that I got from the Facebook page that I engaged with and we've talked along the way. Those are the loyal customers. And building that loyalty is so important. And I can't stress that enough, because, you know, if you get one customer and they buy 5 watches, that's, in my opinion, better than 5 customers. Because when you come out with something new, they'll buy it like that. And that's huge. And I have a couple customers like that, and I might even send those guys a Christmas card. I don't know, but it's a big deal. And you like those guys. They give you money. So, yeah. So when I was designing, I used a lot of Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator. I'm pretty much self-taught in those, never took any classes. I just learned. And it was like, you know, I don't have the money to pay someone $120 an hour to design stuff for me. So I just had to learn, figure it out. YouTube tutorials. You can learn anything on YouTube, right? So, you know, that was a big thing for me is just figuring out how to do it. I designed my own website, do everything, marketing, everything. I don't hire just about anyone. The only person I really hire is sometimes for photography when I have the money and video. And that's about it. So, anyone else? Yeah.
Was your first round of watches that you got and sold, was that through Kickstarter, or how did you know that there was going to be a watch?
Great question. So, yes. The first round, I had 2 primary models that had a couple of color variations. And how I judged the demand and how I decided to move forward with the entire project was from creating that Facebook page. Created the Facebook page, threw up some designs, and said, what do you guys think? I got just so much positive feedback that I was like, there's got to be at least X amount of people that I need to place the order in this world that will want the same thing. So I just kept, you know, funneling some more dollars into that, into the Facebook, promoting it, seeing what people thought, and then judging on that, I And a big thing I want to talk about is I also let a lot of those people help design the watch, pick out the colors, and when you help, and you kind of, it's like crowdfunding the design, kind of. And when people feel like they have helped in the process, they're that much more likely to purchase the product because they feel like, oh, well, I picked orange right there, so, you know, I'm going to buy it because I pretty much designed it. That's how people think, right? Of course, I designed, but, you know, people help, and I allow people's voices to be heard, and I respond to every single comment. Now I have almost 90,000 people on the Facebook page, but every single comment I respond to. Every person, everyone gets a like or you know, a response, and that's big with building brand loyalty. I don't know if that answered your question. Okay, great.
Do you sell online?
Absolutely, everything online.
How do you go about inventory? Were you able to make enough from your first Kickstarter actually run 500 and go back and really sell online? How do you finance your market there and buy another watch off of?
Right. So I can keep cycling, right? So the first run I sold like roughly 150, 170 pre-orders, and that was enough money for me to buy 500. So then when they get here, I have around 300 watches to sell. That's more than enough at the retail pricing that I had to do another round, right? Lost the big money. Now things are changed a little bit. If I hadn't lost that money, I'd probably be sitting on another order right now, just because I would have had more to get the ball rolling. So now it's kind of more, I'm going to do another Kickstarter with new models and see how that works, and then go from there. But it is important to get extra product after the Kickstarter, so it's not just you make a little bit of money off Kickstarter, which a lot of these companies are doing. But sales after Kickstarter is where you make your real money. Kickstarter is just kind of a stepping stone to get there. Absolutely. Okay. Oh yeah. Let me do these two. I'll do your second question first. No, but I have had a student come up to me after giving a talk to a marketing class and say, "Hey, you know, man, you're really cool. Like, I want to buy a watch. I really like the design." And I met with him, sized it for him, and it was a really cool experience, and it was really rewarding. Other than my friends that all have them, you know. So, but yeah, not really. They're such limited numbers that I'm probably not going to run into someone around here. Did have a couple of people, random people that I didn't know from this area buy through the Kickstarter, which was kind of cool. I hand delivered those, and that was nice to see. But and then back to your first question. Right. Okay. That is difficult and easy at the same time. Now with Alibaba going public, you know, everyone's like, oh, you want to manufacture? If you search manufacturers, you're going to get blasted with Alibaba. The problem is Alibaba's good, but not that great. You get a lot of spam. There's a lot of third parties on there that just say that they can do these things, but they're just a couple of guys, you know, that made a page, and then they contact another manufacturer and they get a cut. There's a lot of that going on. So weeding out those in Alibaba is very important. It's very hard. Scrutinize any Alibaba stuff you use. Most of the good companies, not on Alibaba. So I looked up tons of manufacturers. The one that I use right now is not even who I started with. I started with a Swiss company, lost a lot of money with them even, because, you know, they fool you around a little bit. If you're not there and you're not a big client, you know, they're just going to try to take as much money from you as you can, designs and all that stuff. Found a bigger company that is based in Hong Kong, produces a lot of watches for reputable companies that I have heard of and known, and that's what made me decide to go with them, because finding a reputable manufacturer is so important. It's almost more important than anything else, because if you don't have a good product, it doesn't matter what your marketing is, people are going to be disappointed and you're not going to get return customers. And that's a big deal. And number 3. So right now I'm working on an automatic design. Tested the market with a Swiss movement, found it was a little bit too expensive for people's taste. So right now I'm in the process of redesigning and going to offer it with a Japanese movement, which cuts the costs down by 60%, which is a big thing to think about where you have stuff made. And that's a huge, huge thing. Selling it for 600 versus 300, you're going to hit a little bit different market and you're going to get more sales. That's what it boils down to. Right. Typically, no. I try to focus more on the men. I have a woman's brand in my back pocket that I've been working on in my free time, which has been 0. But I had samples made, and I wanted to separate them. Way different selling to women than men. Just huge. It's just way different. And with the automotive kind of theme, I don't think that I would be able to capitalize on the women as much. Now, I do have some women that have purchased these watches, and my first run was really big. 48 millimeter watch is huge on a woman with a small wrist. But there are some that like them, and I get some requests to do women's watches, smaller versions. But with the minimum quantity orders, it just keeps me. That's the threshold keeping me from doing that. It's so expensive to do this kind of thing. So, yeah.
So I'm going to touch on happiness, and I know you recently graduated. So compared to your friends who maybe entered the workforce or your 9-to-5 every day,
Right.
like how do you compare your happiness to others?
Well, I have a lot of friends in the workforce. Most of them are blue collar. Some of them are just rich trust fund babies that do whatever. And then I have one that graduated alongside of me, and now she works at Target. And she makes decent money, but she works all the time, and it's just doesn't sound fun to me. I'm like, you're working at Target. I don't want to work at Target. I don't want people telling me what to do. And I think that, she's happy with her career, I think, but I love what I do. I love watches. I love designing them. I love interacting with people that like them too. It's great to have people from all around the world telling you that what you're doing is cool. And I think that's what keeps me going, not for the money, really, because right now there's very little to go around. It's just everything gets reinvested. But I think that's the main thing for me, is not necessarily the money. It's just being able to do what you love. And I really love doing this, and I'm genuinely happy about it. Although I might get a part-time marketing job just for benefits and stuff like that, and to learn more, I don't think I'll ever stop making my own stuff, designing and that kind of thing. Yeah. Anyone else? All right.
Hello, everyone. First off, I would just thank you guys all for coming. My name is Jacob Kraft. I'm also part of Entrepreneurship here on campus. I'm here to introduce our third speaker, who is Morty Wiggins. He is the former VP of Bill Graham Presents, General Manager of A&M Records, and currently the President of Second Octave Talent. This man has hosted a variety of concerts throughout the North Bay area, ranging from artists from anywhere from Dark Star Orchestra, Ziggy Marley, Swayze, and Rebirth Brass Band. Let's get a round of applause for Morty Wiggins.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Whoa, this isn't going to stay up here. Okay. So my talk is going to be a little different for a couple of reasons. One is that the music business is not a typical business. You can have success in the business with an activity and replicate it and have a very different result. There's an alchemy. There's much more than just a human factor in the music business. So, you know, and I use the word alchemy because sometimes it's a real mystery as to what connects. So, having said that, I've been an executive in the music business for 40 years. And when I first started on my career path during the mid-'70s, most of you were not even born yet. So I'm bringing this up because my background and how I began my career will not necessarily be that relatable to most of you, since you don't have reference points from your experiences and impressions that date back to that time. So I'm left with a bit of a challenge in finding ideas to speak about that don't sound outdated and are still relevant. At the time that I got into the music business, there was no formal training available. Now there are several universities that offer professional music business degrees or certificates, but my training was very much on the go. So most of what I will speak about you may learn in school, but most likely you will learn through trial and error, as I did. I dropped out of high school after my junior year and got my GED. I didn't graduate from college, but after leaving home at 17, out of necessity, became a student of my surroundings. My parents were handicapped. They were both deaf. And this was a big factor in my upbringing. And I bring this up because all of us have a unique set of circumstances that inform our development. And I believe it is important to recognize this because it'll very much give you, and I'll talk about this a little later, a feel for what you get into. And also an inclination. You'll find that you'll have an inclination towards, you know, certain skills and skill sets. And I think this very much comes from our background and our upbringing. The skills we bring to a career are shaped by our upbringing. In my case, early in life, I had to interface with the outside world on behalf of my parents. And this taught me to keep my eyes and ears open and to learn through mimicking those around me. And that really is what I'd like to describe as my first factor for success. To try and be aware of your surroundings and take in as many impressions as possible. And this may sound a little different from the people that came up and spoke before me, but you know, I wouldn't worry too much about being original. Often it's better to do as the Romans do when you're in Rome, to accomplish a task. Interfacing at a young age between my parents and the outside world also taught me, out of necessity, to separate myself from my personal emotions and not be overly reactive. And I'm sure you've all found, just in your interpersonal relationships as well as just your interactions over here at school, and especially in business, there are often conflicting interests. And sometimes you'll be personally aligned with one side or the other of an issue, while needing to incorporate both points of view at best, or you may have to take a side that doesn't necessarily personally sit well with you. And that brings me to what I consider my second factor for success, is learning how to play a role without identifying with it. So as you may have gathered, from a young age, I was exposed to many blue and white collar professionals. My parents' wish for me was to become a lawyer. And I would get a sense of satisfaction dealing with various professionals, and would often imagine what life would be like in this or that career. But it wasn't until I started working on theatrical productions in high school, that I discovered something that really lit me up from the inside. It was then that I first started thinking about working in live production. This was in the early 70s, and music was everywhere and an important part of most of my peers and many young people's lives. I was excited going to concerts, and I wanted to be a part of it, not just a spectator. So this is now my third factor for success, is to find something that you have a feel for. So I think it's probably still true today. I know there's one person here that's involved in music, but breaking into the music business continues to be not easy. It's a challenge. It was hard for me to get an entry-level job, so I started promoting concerts on my own. While I was still young, in my early 20s, when first getting here into Sonoma County, I started promoting at the Vets Halls, and then I went on to lease the River Theater in Guerneville for a couple of years. I showed movies 5 nights a week at the theater and promoted a concert once a month. And the important thing that I learned while doing this was that it's really, really important to understand your market, understand your audience. After a few years, feeling pretty good about myself, I was able to network my way into an entry-level job at Bill Graham Presents. Do you know who Bill Graham was? Yeah, you know, I mean, it's funny, you know, because he's such a huge figure in the music business. But for many people that were born after 1992, which is when he died in a helicopter crash, coming back from a Huey Lewis concert at the Concord Pavilion, you know, most people don't know who he is. Many people who go to concerts now have never. I mean, the guy's name isn't even on the company anymore, so it's kind of remarkable. Someone who could change the face of the concert industry really single-handedly. Just goes to show you how impermanent life is. So I worked my way into an entry-level job at Bill Graham Presents, feeling pretty good about myself as a concert promoter, only to start at the bottom again as the office schlep, the office assistant. I took out the garbage, loaded the soda machine, ran errands, and was the lowest person on the totem pole, so that I had to relieve the receptionist when she took lunch. But I took it as a challenge, and I was determined to be the best office flunky Bill Graham Presents ever had. And I did go on to become one of the vice president and owners of the company after Bill passed. And this is my fourth factor for success. Be aggressive and don't wait on anyone. So once I started climbing up the ladder at Bill Graham Presents, I noticed that some folks who previously wouldn't give me the time of day started taking my calls and acting more friendly towards me. And I always tried to remember my humble beginnings at Bill Graham Presents and not get too carried away with myself. But still, I succumbed to feeling like I was important, and in one particular situation, I copped a major attitude, feeling self-important while dealing with a problem that I had with the general manager of the Oakland Arena, that's now Oracle. And Bill Graham Presents promoted many concerts over there. And it was a very important venue, a very important relationship for the company. Promoting is a very territorial business, so it's really important to have a good relationship with your venues. I'm sorry, excuse me, I forgot to turn this off. Okay, we'll silence that. But, you know, I was feeling really self-important and full of myself, and so I had a very testy exchange with a general manager over at the Oakland Arena. And not probably an hour later, after having this tense exchange, Bill Graham called me into his office and read me the riot act, reminding me that the company was named after him and not me. And so I learned my fifth factor for success kind of the hard way, to not get too carried away with myself, to take and return every phone call and email, because you never know if you will need something from the person you are thinking of blowing off. And most importantly, grandstanding will get you in trouble all the time. So as my career developed, I found myself managing bands and later on managing entertainment companies. I worked hard, and I was also lucky that several artists I represented became successful internationally. Most entertainers have healthy egos, and the same can be said of my fellow executives that I worked with at entertainment companies, and I certainly have my own struggles with my own self-importance in this at that time in this business. And I found that it was really, really, really important to pay attention and consider others to get the best results. And this taught me the sixth factor for success, to get out of my own way while paying attention to others. Really, really, really important, our ability to get out of our own way. So this all these experiences brings me to what's probably one of the more important factors for success, and that's continuously striving for excellence. Bill Graham used to walk around the concert site holding 3x5 file cards on which he would take notes. And when any of us saw Bill write something down within our proximity, it put the fear of God in us. We immediately started looking around, and not only to see what might need to be corrected, but also what can be improved or done better. And for all we knew, Bill could have been scribbling or doodling, but he gave us all the kind of shock that immediately made us pay attention. Bill constantly raised the bar. His mantra was the experience, to give the patron, to give the people who came to our concerts the ultimate experience. And so I came to learn that as a life principle as well, that nothing stays the same, even if we wanted to, including our careers and work. And striving for excellence is an important factor, because we're always evolving or involving, and sometimes in leaps and other times imperceptibly. But learning to always strive for excellence and learning not to fear change is really important. So I know the theme of this conference is about being your own boss, and relative to the music business, I just would like to say, for those of you who are interested in getting into the industry, don't be afraid to start at a low entry-level position, regardless of your desire to run your own company or the degree that you graduate with. Practical working experience is valued above all else in the entertainment industry. Whatever market you're living in and working in, there will be a business that serves the music industry in some fashion. Such as in marketing and promotion, there are radio stations, the entertainment section of print newspapers, social media companies. In the sales area, if there's still a record store in your market, it's a good place to work. There are many digital download stores. There's streaming services. In A&R, there's the recording, the creative process, there are recording studios and production services. The legal aspect of the entertainment business, there are entertainment law firms and the reporting societies like ASCAP and BMI, and companies that serve them and administer copyrights and publishing. And on the touring side, there's production services, sound and light companies, other production companies that do staging. There's booking agencies, merchandising companies, music venues, nightclubs to work at. These are just a few examples. And you really have to remember, too, that one of the unique things about the music business is that the music business is a relationship business. So it's another incentive for getting in and starting on the ground floor, is that you'll make relationships, and the folks you meet along the way will be your allies as your career grows. In the Bay Area here, if you're attracted to the tech world, you'll find that there are many companies in the Bay Area that are working with music in different ways. But you need to be clear, though, whether your interest is in technology or whether it's in music. Is your startup, perhaps, that you're thinking about using music to generate advertising and marketing revenue? Or does the technology you're developing enhance the musical experience? You know, there's nothing wrong with making money. You just need to be clear which is the cart and which is the horse. The experience of success, I think the success of music-oriented tech companies is really around the experience that they deliver to the consumer, to the person who's subscribing. So, in closing, I'd like to address the idea of being your own boss. I've worked for $100 million entertainment companies, privately held music companies, digital media companies, and in the last 5 years, I've hung my own shingle. What I can tell you from experience is that to be free inside is to be your own boss. It really doesn't matter who you work for, others or for yourself, if you're a slave to your job. That inner sense of freedom that you're able to cultivate for yourself on a personal level is really what will allow you to do most of the things that I'm describing and to have success in business, and as James referred to, as well as to find that happiness in life through being a creative person. And when I say creative, I mean in that you're creating an output, not necessarily that you're involved in a creative process. So oftentimes when I don't do this often, but oftentimes when I do speak, people have real specific questions about the music business, either from a musician's point of view or from a business person's point of view. Because like I say, it's not your typical business. It's not manufacturing shoes. You don't just roll out a line of shoes. Every artist is different. Every piece of music is different. What connects, what doesn't. There's a certain kind of magic and alchemy. It's very, very frustrating for the finance administration people in music companies because, as I know you've learned in your business classes, it's necessary to do forecasts and projections and financial plans. And in the music industry, it's really, really, really difficult and borders on fantasy. Quick story: when I first started working at A&M Records, I had come from Bill Graham Presents, and Bill had died in the helicopter crash, and I was one of the vice presidents that bought the company. But things had changed. When Bill was alive, the music industry came to us. He was that big of a guy, and when he was gone, it was different. And at the time, I was managing bands, and I was getting real burnt out on managing bands, and I got an offer to go to A&M Records and be the general manager there, and so I took it. And I went there without really being exposed. I had really been exposed to the finance business side of the inner workings of a record company. As an artist manager, it's a great gig. It's a great job if you have the internal capability of being able to handle it, relative to artists and artist needs and some of the qualities that I was describing. And so you interface with all aspects of an entertainer and musician's career. Including with record companies. But it wasn't until I got inside the walls that I really saw how they run. And so A&M Records was part of Polygram, which was owned by Philips, a publicly traded company. And so shortly after I got there, I had to do a forecast for the upcoming quarter. And that forecast was based on sales of albums, of CDs. And so I took my job really seriously, and so and all the departments except for business affairs and finance reported to me. So I went to each department and talked to them about the artists that we had and what the plans were, and went to the A&R department, found out who's in the studio, who has a record that they're that hopefully will be done during the quarter, and talked to the marketing department and the product managers about what's on slate and what's going to be released. And I came up with a forecast of sales that I thought was realistic and as accurate as can be. And so I turned it into the head of finance, and maybe 3 seconds later, she just gave it back to me. Said, "Not enough sales." I said, "Okay." So I went back to my office and reworked my numbers, and was a little more optimistic on some of the projections, and increased the forecast of sales, and brought it back to her. And really, it was like not even a minute. Looking at it, she said, "Still not enough." And so I went back to my office, and I sat there, and so thought about it for a few minutes. I went back into her office and said, "Okay, what number do you want me to end up at?" And so she told me what number she wanted me to end up at, and I said, "How are we going to get to that number?" And she said, "Well, what about Sting?" And Sting was on A&M Records, but he wasn't on my forecast. I said, "Well, Sting's not even in the studio yet, so how do we know what kind of record he's going to make? If there's going to be a single on it, if it's going to be a hit? I mean, we don't even know if it's going to come out during the quarter that you're asking me to forecast." And she said, "Doesn't matter, just put it in there." And ultimately, at the end of the year, when it came to be a bonus time, if we made our numbers, it was completely by accident, really, because none of us really knew if a record was going to come out or not, if a record was going to be a hit. But we were all geniuses if we made our numbers. And then, another year, if we didn't make our numbers, then we were all idiots. And I bring this up because that's one of the hardest things to accept when you're in the industry, is that, because you could do the same things. You could work your tail off and you could do the same things for all artists, and some make it and some don't. And so you can't look and say, you can't come to the conclusion that you were brilliant one time and a moron the next. You gotta accept the fact that there's this crazy kind of magic that happens in culture and entertainment and what connects. And it's the exciting and fun part of the music industry, and also for people that are really into business, it's really, really frustrating. So with that, if anyone has any questions, and I'm happy to answer questions really specifically, like if there are musicians that have questions about copyrights or publishing, if there are business people that have questions specifically about an area of the industry to get into, or what the dynamic is like, or how to approach it, I'm happy to get real granular and just give you some useful information that you could take away from this. Yeah. Yeah, so the biggest failure that I had was right here at Sonoma State. In 1970-something, I did a Jimmy Buffett concert here. Do any of you know who Jimmy Buffett is? Well, back then, Jimmy Buffett was freaking huge. He had this hit, Cheeseburger in Paradise. I don't know if any of you had ever heard this song. And he was a big, big, big star. And so we wanted to do, I wanted to do a Jimmy Buffett concert, and I wanted to do it outdoors. And so we did it on the football field over here at Sonoma State. And the first day, and so there are obstacles all along, but my experience around this was I was still pretty young, and this was on the heels of doing shows for a couple of years at the Vets Halls, and I was feeling pretty good about myself, having some successes, so I wanted to do this big show. And so I had to fly down to L.A. and meet with a guy named Irving Azoff. Some of you who maybe dance around the music business might have heard the name, but he was like the mega manager. He managed all the stars then. So I went down there and gave him my pitch to do a show up here, and he totally raped me. Totally, every penny that possibly could have been made on that show, he insisted on as a guaranteed fee. And we fell short. We fell short on our ticket sales. And I don't know, I don't remember how much we lost, but as Justin was describing, back then, for being a young guy and just starting out, it was a lot of freaking money. And yeah, that was the biggest failure that I had. But with concert promoting, no one bats 1,000. No one. And the thing that you learn in the music business is that you really have to develop your ancillary revenues. And what I mean by that is that, back then when I did this show, I lived and died by the box office. Right now there's not one promoter in the country that lives and dies by the box office. They have their sponsorship revenue, they have their parking revenue, they have their VIP revenue, they have their cut of concessions, and all these things contribute not only towards the bottom line, but contribute towards taking the pressure off of the box office to at least break even on a show. Parenthetically, we're going into our third year of promoting just down the street here at the Sonoma Mountain Village. In our first 2 years, we did a really shitty job of developing our ancillary revenues, and we paid for it. There were some shows this last season, in our second season, where we lost money that we had no business losing money. It's the attendance wasn't bad. It's just that we hadn't developed any of our ancillaries well enough to cover that margin. Typically speaking, from a promoter relationship with booking agencies and managers, the split is 85-15. You're given a 15% promoter profit. And oftentimes, your overall budget, talent, and production costs, could approach $100,000. And so you're putting up a tremendous amount of money for a 15% promoter profit margin. So the ancillaries are really important because you don't share those with the artists. Those all just go right down to your company's bottom line. Any other questions? Yes. So, procuring the venues, well, let's start with talent. So, on the talent side, you have to work your way up. You know, and it really hasn't changed much. Depending on how big the act is that you want to buy, you know, you'll be successful, more or less successful by your experience and your relationships. If you're just starting out and you're looking to book a significant artist, oftentimes the agent will have you pay all the guarantee up front. In 2 payments, you know, usually a 50% deposit and then the remaining 50% before the date actually plays, before the artist even arrives in your town, in your market. But, you know, these days there are so many acts that are touring because recorded music revenue is just falling apart. So many acts that didn't really tour that much, that depended on recorded music revenue, have to go out on the road now. And new acts that are coming up that are trying to break, you know, unless you're a pop artist that could get on terrestrial commercial radio, you're going to break through touring. And that's a multi-year process. Point being that there are a lot of acts now on the road. So it's really, you know, in some sense, better for first-time buyers because it's a buyer's market, because there are so many acts that are touring. But when you get to the upper strata of artists, the bigger national recording artists that typically are in the $50,000 guarantee and above, there's still more dates that they can choose from than they need to provide. There's still competition for the dates. Well, you know, depending on where you're at. You know, I mean, if you're a recognized, established promoter, then you get calls from booking agencies regularly, and they're like, "Hey, I got this band. You know, I have this artist. I'm looking for dates." The vernacular is, "We're looking for available dates." So you as a promoter are calling a booking agent, and you're asking for avails for a particular artist, or the booking agent is contacting you and saying, "Hey, I have a tour, and I'm looking for avails on this time." As you get established as a promoter, and you want to develop and keep those relationships, because it's a very competitive territorial business, and so if you have any success, count on it. Another promoter will be coming into your market. So then you want to keep your relationship with the booking agencies and make sure that they're offering you the talent first. They won't necessarily offer it to you cheaper, but that they offer it to you first. So then you're going to find yourself in a position where you're going to often have to buy talent that you don't want, you know, because you have a relationship with the agent. So they're going to say, "Okay, I have this tour for this artist," and you go, "That artist is a stiff. You know, last time I did him up here, it didn't do shit. You know, I don't want him again." And I'll go, "Look, you know, if you want to keep on doing business with CAA or with me, or if you want this other act that I have on my roster, I really need this date." And then you bite the bullet and just hope that you can find a way to break even. Yeah.
What sort of research do you do or things do you look into to determine if a specific artist is going to be successful on the market?
Yeah, that's such a challenge now because the industry has become so fractured with digital files. And we could talk about digital files for hours and how that has changed our world completely. But it used to be that radio, broadcast terrestrial radio, was the main driver of music sales, whether it be tickets, albums, whatnot. So it was relatively simple. You just checked what the local radio stations were playing. You know, you stayed in touch with the program directors, the music directors at the radio stations, find out what's hot, what's generating phone calls, what's researching well, you know, and then you try and be a little early maybe sometimes, but you can see what's a hit, what's happening just through the media in your market. Well, now, you know, there's a whole generation of music lovers that don't listen to the radio at all. So it's become very challenging, very, very challenging. You know, and then you get to a place like I'm at, where I'll be 60 years old this next birthday. So I don't know what the fuck 20-year-olds want to go see, and you know, I don't really care. You know, I mean, on a personal musical level, I'm not going to, you know, be interested so much in many of these acts. So, you know, I often bring this up. It's a young person's business. You know, so then you got to hire young people to do your booking and hope that they have their finger on the pulse and they can make the right choices. But by and large, most of the marketing and promotion that we do to sell tickets and to sell music is done through social media. So wherever you can get analytics on social media, that's a good place to go. Any other questions? Yeah. So, you know, when you get into this, it gets to be a smaller and smaller world, mostly because of relationships. But then there are some resources. There's a company called Polestar, and they track all of the touring artists and all of the grosses, all of the ticket sales, and then they also have a directory of all the artists and their representatives. So you subscribe to Polestar. It costs about $400 a year. It's not cheap, you know, and they charge you more if you have more over a certain amount of users, and you can get most of your information from there, assuming that you're promoting artists that are national touring artists. There are many, many venues and many promoters that don't report their results to Polestar. And those are more, usually smaller, either smaller venues. Like, you know, for instance, you know, the Hop Monk over here in Sonoma County does national acts, but I don't think they report their results to Polestar. So, you know, if you're looking to see how someone did in Sonoma County, you know, you'd have to stretch out a little and see maybe how they did in, you know, neighboring, well, how did they do in San Francisco, and then realize that we're half the market. I mean, probably less than San Francisco, and then proportionately try and figure out. So if someone did 1,000 tickets in San Francisco, you know, on a good day, they'll do like maybe you could project they'll do 500 tickets up here. You know, and then you could just go on the websites of the major talent agencies. You know, once you start getting familiar with the business, you can see that there's a half a dozen major talent agencies: William Morris Endeavor, CAA, Creative Artists, CAA, Paradigm, United Talent Agency. Anyway, there's probably, you know, a few more that I'm not thinking of. And you just go on their website and look at their artist roster. You know, you could also Google an artist, you know, find their website, go on, hit contacts, and you'll see their booking representative listed over there. Digital files. It's really incredibly huge change in our business. Huge, huge, huge. Really made it so that it's a really exciting and fun time for people to come in as a new entrant. Really, it's more, there's, I mean, as a musician, there's no barriers to publishing. Anyone can publish. Anyone can, you know, download, you know, Garage Band or whatever it is, and, you know, record a record at home, and, you know, and you could, I mean, what is it, like $50 on CD Baby or something, you know, something like that, $50, and they'll upload it to iTunes, all the streaming services, et cetera, for you. Their sister company, disc makers, are all owned by the same people. They'll manufacture for you and ship a certain amount of units to one-stops that are still servicing independent mom-and-pop record stores. All you can do. Before, you couldn't do that. Before, you know, if you wanted to get your records into a store, you either had to find your local store that you could drop them off on consignment, or you had to try and get a distribution deal, because you couldn't be open to buy with the bigger retail stores. You know, they don't want to deal with every, you know, pitch-kapatch artist. So, you know, but now there's, you know, you could manufacture your CDs and sell them off of the stage, and it's kind of like another merch item, like T-shirts and stickers. And you could sell off your website, and you could upload. To iTunes and the other digital distribution stores. Really, no barriers to publishing. I mean, and that's part of the challenge, really. And some might say the problem is that there's a tremendous amount of noise out there. Really, really hard to break an act. Much harder. You know, it used to be, you know, people would complain a lot because they were gatekeepers. I happened to be one of the gatekeepers, so I never complained. And it was a lot easier to break an act. You know, I mean, you could get it on the radio. You could, you just stay in touch with the radio stations. Pay. I mean, payola is still alive and well. Pay to get some, get it on, get some rotation, see what you got, see if it's reacting, and if it is, then you press the button, spend gobs of money doing that nationally, and voila, you'd have a hit. You know, but now it's really, really difficult. Still happens in pop music. Still happens in pop music a lot. Pop radio is still very strong. CHR, Contemporary Hit Radio, is still very strong. Still good numbers, not as good as they used to be, but still good numbers, still good audience share, still very effective driver. You know, but a lot of rock music now, I mean, I don't know. You know, classic rock radio stations have pretty good numbers still, but, you know, they're not playing new music. If you're a young rock band, you know, if you're a young rock band and you don't have great songs and you're not great live and you don't have a star on stage, then you have very little chance of getting anywhere and doing anything in the business. And you really have to be, for a young artist now, you really, really have to be committed to touring. And so that's why it's oftentimes a young person's business. It's not like there's a prejudice about age. There's a prejudice about responsibility. As you get older, you get more responsibility. So, by the time you're, in your 30s, maybe you're married or maybe you have a girlfriend and, or a boyfriend and they're like, time to get a job, I'm tired of you sleeping on my couch, or your parents are tired of you living at home, or you start to have or you have a kid and you don't want to be away, and you start to have responsibilities. And when you have responsibilities, you can't, be broke and living a poverty level existence trying to enhance your career. And that's why mostly young people are into it, because as you get older, you get more responsibilities. Yeah, Darren. That's a really good question. It used to be that to dial in a good sound system in a venue took a lot of outboard gear. And even still, it was a challenge. If you're in a boomy room, a big box, with a high ceiling, it's always been a challenge. But with digital equipment, it's the press of a button. An analyzer, it used to be you'd have to play this like white noise through a PA system, and it would be like, and then look at an analyzer, and then graphically equalize their different frequencies to get it to try and sound decent. And now it's all done with the press of a button. And then also lighting systems. Lighting systems are pretty amazing now. What you could do with lights and specials, and those are all operated digitally now. The great news is also, small sound systems, small PAs, where sound systems where you're mixing the mains and the monitors from the same front of house position. A lot of these systems now you operate off of an iPad. And so you're going up there and you're like, you're able to mix what the musicians want off of your iPad. That's remotely you can see the levers, the faders move on the board, and it's a real trip. So yeah, it saved a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of labor. Labor is one of your biggest costs when it comes to promoting concerts. So yeah, tremendous improvement, for sure. So, I think that EDM music is here to stay. Every time there's kind of like this new genre that old people don't understand, or aren't, well, I shouldn't say don't understand, aren't invested in, there's this resistance. Like I said, it's not going to hang out. It's not going to last. And, same thing was said about hip-hop music when hip-hop music came out. And there's a certain amount of that chatter around EDM music. But, it's obvious it's here to stay. The numbers are huge. We hope to do some EDM shows. Our biggest issue about doing EDM shows, because I think we've proven ourselves. So, there's always this fear, because there are well-publicized drug overdoses at EDM concerts. And, the fact of the matter is that, if you look at the history of concerts and you look at all genres, I don't know if EDM genre has more drug overdoses or more drug problems than any other genre, really. Certainly not significantly. But we've gained the trust of the city of Rohnert Park and the police department, and so I don't think there's an issue about safety. For us, it's an issue around curfew. We have a noise curfew during the week of 10:30, and on weekends 11 o'clock. And during the summer, it doesn't even get dark out till 9:30. So for an EDM show, that doesn't really work. Because it's very, very production oriented, very production heavy, and it needs to be dark, to have that production value really be appreciated. And during the week we'd have an hour of darkness. So that's really what's holding us back from doing EDM. Yeah, I was really lucky. First of all, I got to tell you, I was really lucky because I got to work in the music business during the real fat years. It was really fat, and but I want to tell you right now, it was built off of the backs of artists. The amount of stealing that record companies and music companies do around music and copyrights is, it's significant, and so. The fat years that I was lucky enough to enjoy really were built on the back of artists. But my my best experience, far and away, was I was one of the producers of the first Amnesty International tour. I don't know if you may not remember that. It happened, I think, in the mid '80s, late '80s, mid '80s, and it was one of those high-profile, big international events. You know, we flew around in private jets, and who was the headliner on that tour? Let's see, U2. It was U2, Sting, and later the Police did a reformed gig on a couple of the stops. Peter Gabriel and like 3 other artists, and we traveled the world in a private jet doing these concerts for Amnesty International, which were awareness raising. You know, kind of, I guess, you know, it really resonates with me, and I remember it fondly because of something that James said around, you know, doing something for social good. It felt good to be part of this big effort to fight for political freedom. Yeah.
My question is, don't mean to backtrack, but like Darren was saying, like you were saying, EDM is definitely becoming more popular. With EDM, there's this thing that's also been developed called silent concert, silent disco. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No.
But basically what it is when you walk through the entrance, you walk through the door, everyone's handed a set of headphones. And
What a trip.
I've done it a couple of times, and I think it's really cool. A, because it's different, but also, you know, the music's not playing out back. You can all take your headphones and sort of talk. I guess my kind of question would be: do you think that this is something that is sort of just a fad, or do you think it's something that can continue to become bigger? Because not only is it cool on the consumer side and the person that's actually at the concert, but there's actually some value for the promoter side as well.
Mhm. Yeah, it's our curfew, yeah.
So I guess my question is, do you think that this is something that
I would give it a try, you know, because it still leaves intact and still supports what I think is the main driver of the concert experience, and that is that we're social animals, and you know, it's just not as much fun and not the same feeling watching a concert streaming on your computer screen. You know, I mean, when I first started going to shows, I mean, that's where you met girls, that's where you did drugs, that's, you know, I mean, that was like the safe haven, you know, I mean, so, you know, it didn't matter almost, you know, if you liked the band or not, you know, tickets were cheap enough at that point too. I mean, you know, people used to go to the Fillmore in San Francisco and not know who was playing. You know, I mean, it cost $1.50, $2 to get in, you know, in the late 60s, early 70s, but, you know, people would go for the experience. But it sounds like a cool experience, you know, and that's really what the business is based on. The live music business is based on, is the experience. You know, at Bill Graham Presents, we did, you know, Bill, like I was saying, he was always like, you know, he was always raising the bar. And so he had us do a Jerry Garcia show on top of Squaw Creek. So, you know, it was like, how do we get 10,000 people, 8,000 feet up into the meadow up there? And, you know, on gondolas, and I mean, it was wild. It was crazy. It was a wild experience. But what you're describing sounds like a pretty cool experience. You know, yeah, we might have to check it out. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I'd just like to take a moment to just give to the speakers just a round of applause. They've really touched on some things that you can't learn by looking at a graph in an econ class. Anyways, my name is Nick Donahue. I'm one of the more recent members of Entreprenoma, and I am here to introduce our final speaker, who, as a young man, always had the hopes of opening his own car body shop. And then suddenly, he was removed from high school. However, as he began his venture into the United States Air Force, the world was brewing another fate, and utilizing that same entrepreneurial spirit and work ethic, he climbed his way to the heights of a top Fortune 50 corporation. Without further ado, I give you the Vice President of International Development at Boeing, my father, Tommy Donahue Jr.
All right, thank you for having me today. My presentation is going to be quite a bit different than the other guests here, although you'll find a lot of things that are very similar. Can you hear me okay? All right, so I'm going to be talking today about stepping stones to success. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life, some of the things that Nick just talked about. I'll highlight a few of those things that were good, a few of those things that weren't so good. But most importantly, I want to give you a few things that you can take away and do something with in your future. I want to comment on Morty. In my stage of my life, my career, a lot of my business is built on relationship. I get a deal, and I'm not bragging or name dropping, so don't take it that way. With Ministers of Defense, some royals, I've met some heads of states because it comes with time, reputation, and you doing what you say you're going to do. Or if you have a problem in life, you fess up and you try to make good on whatever your problem is. Like the example we had with the watches, if you have a problem, go figure out a solution for it, because things are going to happen, things are going to go wrong. So when they happen, when they go wrong, find a solution for it. Find a way. Just don't give up. A couple things before I tell you my story, and my story is not important, but what is important about it is some decisions I made that I figured were very risky at the time. I made them. They worked out. I made a few mistakes. I even got kind of fired from a job I'll tell you about in just a minute one time, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So I'm going to start and I'm going to finish with these same four things. So if you don't take anything else away, I'd ask that you consider these, please. Find something you like to do. Whether you're an entrepreneur, not everybody can be an entrepreneur. Being your own boss, I agree, is the greatest way to go. I try to do that inside a big company, and Boeing, our brand, is everything to us. Boeing will not jeopardize our brand at all. If you think about space station, Dreamliner, F-15 fighters, Apaches, cargo planes, whatever it is, very, very important to us that our brand stays intact. So find something you like to do, whether that's water skiing, making watches, fishing, the wine industry. If you like what you do, you're much more likely to be happy, whether you're an entrepreneur or you work for a company. Don't be afraid to take risk. Again, I'm going to tell you about a few risks that I took along my career that in general paid off fairly well. Surround yourself with people you trust. Somebody asked about friends earlier. There's a couple of comments on it. When you trust somebody, you got to know that they're going to do what you need them to do in a given situation. Typically, family and friends don't work out. I know a couple of cases where they did work out very well. So if you know that person's capability, what they can do and they can't do, it's worth knowing them in depth. Be true to yourself. Whatever makes you up, whatever drives you, whatever motivates you. And a couple of the entrepreneurs that I know are so passionate about what they do. They break a lot of glass getting where they're going to go. But at the end of the day, they're very successful. They'll get on to the next passion after that. So if that's what motivates you, what drives you, go after it. Especially while you're young, you can afford to make mistakes. And then, like I said, be yourself. Whatever you are, whatever makes you you, I would follow that dream. So a little bit about my story. Nick touched on a couple of things there. I grew up in a very poor family. My parents live in Fillmore, California, and not to be confused with Morty's Fillmore. It's a little town just outside Ventura where I was born. They worked in the citrus industry. My dad just retired this year. He started in the same job with the same company with no benefits before I was born. So if you can imagine that, you guys are leap years ahead of where he started or where I started. My mom did something similar in a packing plant, packing oranges. I worked with both of them from the time I was 13 or so, and I thought, this is not for me. I want to do something a little bit better. By the time I got to my junior year in high school, as Nick said, I kind of departed high school. I call it that I quit and I wanted to join the military. I was actually asked not to come back, so I needed to do something. So the Air Force was a good choice for me. I like to work on cars. I was a mechanic. As he said, I wanted to be a body and fender guy. Man, if you asked me I was going to be where I am today, that back in that time frame 38 years ago, not in this lifetime, I would never have guessed. So anyway, that very, very important part there. So I did go in the Air Force. I was a mechanic. Probably 18 years old, I was flying by myself on C-5 cargo planes to Japan, Guam, England, Germany. I got the travel bug young. This is so cool. Till the first time I left Guam and the engine blew up on takeoff, I thought I was going to die for sure because you go out over the water. Came back down. I got stuck there a week by myself, 18 years old, trying to change this big jet engine. I eventually got smart and asked for help. The point is, find a way with whatever situation you're in. Don't give up. There's a way out there. There's a solution. There's somebody that can help you. You just got to be willing to go find it and ask for that help. A couple years later, I was a sergeant at 21. I was in charge of this aircraft crew. A few years later, I was a staff sergeant. I had a whole flight of airplanes I was in charge of, my early 20s, which is kind of scary, but in the military, you get a lot of responsibility at a very young age. The camaraderie you have with these guys, I've never seen anything like it in my life. It's amazing. So I'm very, very high on supporting our troops in the United States. Talking about trust with people I mentioned earlier, I work for a guy named Ron. I won't say his last name, but Ron suggested I go work in the quality world. It was good for promotions, good for career. I said, I don't want to be one of those guys. They come out here, nobody likes them. They're inspectors. I don't think so. So I had a lot of respect for this guy. He talked me into it. A few months later, the U.S. Air Force had awarded this contract to McDonnell Douglas to develop the C-17 cargo plane. If you've seen Transformers or Fast and Furious, the big airplane doing the drops, that's a C-17. I was on that for the beginning stages when it was an idea and a drawing. The guy says, hey, I know your reputation, you do a good job, you work hard, people trust you, people respect you. What do you think about being on the initial cadre for this program with McDonnell Douglas? It's just getting off the ground. There's 4 or 5 of us guys that started working the project. It was a good deal, good experience. So I'd go down in uniform to Long Beach, and the more time I spent with McDonnell Douglas, the more comfortable I got. I would go down there and say, you guys are doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, and I just became very vocal. And for an enlisted guy, that's kind of unheard of. But my boss was backing me on this. So a few times we made a point where they were absolutely wrong. We had to change design, which in airplane business is like a 10-year cycle to design and build an airplane and certify it, so it's a big deal. After a while, they really started listening to what we had to say. This group of 5 or 6 people got some respect from these guys, and as the first airplane flew, it was a big relief. Shortly after that, McDonnell Douglas offered me a job, and I'd been in the Air Force about 14 years. A couple important things were going on in the world. One, the Cold War was over, so they were cutting back on the military, so it was an opportunity to get out early. And 2, the first Gulf War had started, so us guys in flight test couldn't go because we had the B-2 bomber in development. We had the Advanced Future Fighter at the time, the C-17. So I thought, why not? I might get out and go to work with these guys. So what I did is I went to my trusted advisors and I said, hey, what do you guys think? And they're of the same opinion I was. Hey, these guys are going to get canceled. They don't know what they're doing. They're over cost. They're behind schedule. Don't do it. Stay another 6 years, retire from the Air Force. You could keep working. It's a comfortable life. I went to the one guy that I worked for at the flight test center and he goes, I think it's okay to take a risk. This is an opportunity you're not going to get again. Yeah, it's risky. The program could get canceled. But even if you spent 2 or 3 years working with these guys, you're ahead of the flight ramp, the delivery center, you're building these airplanes. I mean, where are you going to get an experience like that? So I thought about it for a little while. And at the end of the day, obviously, I made the decision to go work for those guys. I got to tell you, a month or 2 into the job, I was questioning my decision. Was this a smart move or not? But at the end of the day, it really worked out. So I ended up running final assembly. Every C-17 I ever see in the world, they either had something to do with building it or I sold all of the rest of them, starting from the 70th aircraft. I got in a situation once where I worked for this guy who used to be my peer. He and I didn't get along, so be careful who you work for and who you step on as you go up. So this guy came to me one day and said, and this is a risk that I took, so if you could take advantage of this comment. He says, I want you to change from focusing on delivering airplanes on time to more cost and more profit. And me being a blue suit or an ex-Air Force guy, said, well, if we owe the airplane to the customer this day, this is McDonnell Douglas days, I'm going to deliver it to him. And he said, no, I want you to cut back. But he knew that I had such a long reach back into the U.S. government that he wasn't going to make me do something. But at the end of the year, when it come time for performance reviews, he says, I told you that you should have done this, and you did what you wanted to do anyway. I'm just telling you, you made a bad career choice for yourself. And I said, at the end of the day, I want to look myself in the mirror and know that I did what I thought was right. So he basically said, you can either do what I want you to do or you can change jobs. I thought, wow, am I getting fired here? So he gave me 24 hours to think about this. I've never told Nick this story, I don't think. Probably a shocker. So I came back the next day and I said, I have to believe in myself and do what I think is right. So I'm not going to do it. I refuse to do it. So fortunately, the guy that was the president of the Southern California area for McDonnell Douglas at the time said, I like you, I respect you. He gave me 6 months, if you can imagine this. Go figure out what you want to be in life in a company. So I did program management for a month or 2, product support, I went to engineering. At the end of the 6 months, he says, okay, what do you want to be? And I said, I want to be a program manager. I want to run the whole thing, I want to guide the engineers, I want to run the production guys, I want to do the support. So we had a UK customer we're trying to campaign and win for, and I know there's some strategy guys in the room, so I do Boeing strategy if you want to chat afterwards. Let's go win this campaign. We spent 2 or 3 years doing it. Everything in Europe is politics. We had to find a way to lease these airplanes to these guys, and it was a tremendous experience, just really amazing. Had a similar chance to go into business development. I didn't want to do that. In our company, business development is sales foremost. We do joint ventures, we do strategy, we do marketing. Some guy, again, I trusted, said, I want you to go do this. I took a chance. I did a risk on it. I've been doing it about 8 years now, so I sell everything from F-15s, F-18s, Apache helicopters, Chinook, C-17s, which there's only one left. unfortunately, tanker aircraft. So that's kind of my responsibility or my swim lane. So it was a good thing, even though I didn't want to do it. Sometimes I still question the move, but it actually worked out very well. Again, I took a risk on something. I try to be inside Boeing or in our company, and I know other guys in other companies like Northrop or Lockheed, my peers, that you can be your own boss to a certain extent. You have goals, financial goals, customer satisfaction goals. If you can meet those, you can be your own boss to some extent. But if you can imagine the safety implications of an airplane, there's a lot of processes, a lot of regulations, a lot of those kind of things they have to follow. If you can stay within that box, I think there is an opportunity to be your own boss. Some people worry about, like my wife, for example, about the security, and I'm more entrepreneurial. So like, let's start our own company when I retire. I can retire next summer. No, I like the whole idea of the security in the company. So you have to decide what's right for you. And I think a little bit of trial and error and taking some risks, like some of the folks have talked about, is very, very important. And if you can do that at a young age, I think it will really help you as you go forward. The entrepreneurial part, the risk and the reward, I think there's tremendous reward there. Again, I think failing a few times is probably okay. You learned a tremendous amount of information and experience from doing that, so I think that's a healthy thing. Being creative, be passionate. Whatever you decide you want to do, be passionate about it. Don't have to get up. I still get up at 4:35 in the mornings on Saturday, Sunday. I don't want to. I just wake up because I'm excited about life. I want to go do something. I want to make something happen. So if you're going to do something, be passionate about it. Then I'll come back to my first points that I made to you in the beginning. I'll answer any questions you have. Find something you want to do. And it may be that you need to go work for somebody that does a similar business, just because it might look good on the outside, but when you get in, maybe it's something totally different than what you thought it was. So it's better to do it on somebody else's dime or experience than to use your own money. In some cases, if you got a good idea, then maybe you take your own chances. Again, take risk. You're young, you got plenty of time to recover. Do it now. If you can imagine losing your job or failing in a business when you're 40, you got 2 kids, a kid in college, much different time. So get out there now and make those mistakes. Surround yourself with people you trust, and they may end up being classmates like you have in the room today in the future. Again, know what they can and can't do and what you can expect of them. And lastly, be true to yourself. Whatever you think is right, look yourself in the mirror and know you did what you think was right at the end of the day. With that, I'll open up for questions. Yes, sir. Well, I think it goes back to, I've watched people in different companies and different businesses where they'll do what a company may, and this is no reflection on Boeing. Boeing's a tremendous company. Again, very proud of our brand. Where you do something, you might make a decision you otherwise wouldn't make to get a position or to get a rating that you like to get, and you get that, but at the end of the day, you have this feeling inside you that I didn't do what I thought was right. And in my case, it was more important for me to be comfortable with who I am, and I did what I thought was right. So it was very uncomfortable, especially when the guy says, he told me, you're not going to be working here if you don't come back with the right answer tomorrow. So I had to go in with that. I'd been in the company a few years, and I'm thinking, did I make a mistake? At the end of the day, I did what was right, and it ended up being the best opportunity for me. I got into doing something totally different from being a production guy. So I would do it again today. But it's gut-wrenching at the time you're going through it, for sure. Yes, ma'am. For a while, in all honesty, this is before Boeing took our company over. He thrived for a little while. At the end of the day, usually what makes you stronger, gets you by, if it's not, the truth and doing what's right, it catches up with you. He ended up getting hit later on, as did the guy that told me to do it. He got fired at the end of the day. So what comes around goes around. Respect people as you're growing up. Make sure you know what they can do. Help people when they need help. Don't turn your back on a friend when they need help. So I would just be out there and treat other people. Be nice. Treat them like you want to be treated. Yes, sir. So our biggest customer is the U.S. government, obviously. They have the most fighters, biggest military in the world. All of our major allies, whether it's NATO, it's Europe, Japan, Australia, the Middle East, we have some close partners there, the Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the Emirates, Singapore. all of the stuff that I do, obviously our biggest part of our company is about 70-30 are commercial airplanes. I'm in the defense military side of it. So yes, it's always to a government. You can't sell, obviously you're not going to sell an F-15 to Joe Bob's auto shop or something like that, or even like a C-17 cargo plane. I mean, it does airdrops so accurate. You could drop anything, including a weapon, on this room if you wanted to. It's that good. So you got to be very careful where you put that stuff. It's always to a government, and each government, is always, these are our friends, and here are our best friends to get the best technology. And the other guys, if you're on an iffy list, we have a box to work in. If you're outside the box, you just don't get it, regardless of the business. Yes, sir.
Do you think your mentality of doing what's right helps you gain trust with customers? Do customers trust you to help them get the best deal?
Yeah, absolutely. And they realize it's a business, and sometimes you'll do something that might be marginal, that it's not really your fault, but it's a customer satisfaction issue. If you take care of that one time and you tell them, hey, look, I'm going to give this to you because it's the right thing for long-term business, and you have to treat this as a journey. It's not something that's over quick. Then it definitely does. I'll have a customer call me now. We'll meet over dinner sometimes, and we'll work out a deal, and then we'll have a whole team of contracts guys, lawyers, everybody come in and make the deal look like what we've agreed to with all the right terms and conditions and stuff. But if you have that trust with them, they'll do business with you every time. It takes a long time to get that trust, and all you have to do is screw it up one time. You might not ever get it back. Yes, ma'am. Typically, the U.S. process is very structured, so you have a team of contracts guys, lawyers that deal with whether it's the Army on Apache or the Air Force on F-15s. It was a little more structured. When you do international business, you know who's done it before, who can do it, who can relate with this customer's culture. Sometimes culture is a significant issue, and if you put the wrong personality in there, it's a deal killer. So over time, you figure out who those people are. On paper, they're not always what they seem, so you try to have a couple of seasoned people, some people that are willing to lean forward and do something different. Because all companies get stuck on their laurels. We've always done it this way. We're always going to do it that way. And say, that's not going to work here. So you want to bring in somebody that can kind of get over that hurdle. I've had cases where we couldn't get past one particular term for months and months at a time. I find that, especially if it's someplace you don't want to be, everybody wants to go to Rome or Sydney or Barcelona. But if you're sending somebody to country X where no one wants to be, and I'll leave those countries out, but you bring them over there and you sit them down with you, obviously you find a way fairly quickly after a few days to get past that hurdle. So it depends. There's some known, proven people out there that know what they're doing, and you try to use them as much as possible. At the same time, bring some other people up, so when they move on to something different, you have a backup plan. Nick, do you have a question? I say one, in Americans especially, not so much other countries, everybody does, but especially Americans, is you have to respect their culture and what they do. And we Americans, what we typically do, and I'm including myself in this as I started, you go in, you do a PowerPoint briefing, you show them your stuff, and you don't understand why people don't want to do business the way we do. So I'd say one, respect their culture, the way they do business. Make sure you understand them, what works and what doesn't work. And if you tell them you're going to do something, do it. And if you can't do it, get on the phone or go. International people like to see you in face-to-face and not on the phone or video conferencing. You go over, you sit down in front of them, hey, this is not quite right. Here's a couple of solutions we have. Are you okay if we take, option A, B, or C? Do what you say you're going to do, and if you can't do it, go tell them why and come up with a solution. Anything else? All right. Thank you very much.
Well, that concludes our entrepreneurship conference. I want to thank everybody so much for coming out, and I want to give another round of applause to all the speakers that came out. You're starting your own business, and you guys are, top executives in your own company, so I understand that it's super, hard to come out here and allocate some time to this, so we really appreciate that. Entreprenoma, as you guys know, Sonoma State University's entrepreneurship program. A few of you guys came up to me and asked me how to get involved. So if you're interested in that, please see me after the event, and we can discuss how you can get involved in future events that we're holding. And yeah, thank you so much. If you guys haven't signed up out there on the paper, I know a few of you are here for class and extra credit. So if you didn't sign in, please sign in. And thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it, guys.